Hey, welcome back to another Just 15 Mins or Minutes. Am I going to use mins or minutes? Who cares? Hello, it's David here. And another ramble. Will we make it in 15 minutes? Well, if I stop rambling, we might. Okay, so what have I got? There's a lot of buzz around MCP, which is Model Context Protocol. Okay. And you think, who cares? What does that mean? And look, to the everyday person, the analogy that has been thrown around for a little while now. By the way, MCP came out, was it sometime October 2024? We're now October, or towards the end of October 2025. Anyway, Anthropic, who made Claude and, Claude Desktop and the Claude code and things like that, they created it, and it was a way because already with a lot of the LLMs like ChatGPT and Gemini from Google and Claude from Anthropic, there were all these LLMs needing to, well, I say needing to, but they ultimately get to a point where they want to connect to other things, So the classic analogy was like a USB-C. So, you've got it, well, wherever you are in the world, but you've got a USB that connects your computer to all these other devices, basically. And it's generally universal, not totally, but anyway, the analogy works. But you can connect your phone to your computer, a hard drive, or whatever it is. So really, that's MCP. And at the moment, that's all you really need to know. It's just a way of connecting tools to large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc. Okay, so there's obviously a depth of MCP, but all you really need to know is that essentially you've got a host with MCP that has a client. Okay, now at the moment for today, I'm going to be using Claude Desktop. Okay. You can, there are other ways of connecting this up, by the way. But the point being is that we have something like Claude. There's IDEs like for development tools, and there's lots of other things. And you can actually write your own as well. But ultimately, right now, for a generally a non-coder type person, that's all you've got to understand is that these are tools that can connect things together. So I'm going to be using Claude Code, as I've mentioned. So, but the idea is that this protocol will then connect to things called servers, which essentially are the back end, the bit that then connects to whatever it is that has to be performed. So it could be a data source, an API, which is basically connecting to another service, whatever that might be, a CRM service or whatever it could be. And it sort of handles connecting back and forth between the client, which again, I'm going to be using Claude Desktop. So just bear with that idea. So again, you just need to know that this is a way of bringing tools, and then basically they can be used with your AI LLM. So Claude Desktop, that's what I've got. You can use it from, Mac, Windows, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so the way this works is that there's actually a lot of ways, if I can actually get the window to stay where it wants to be. But first of all, there's a lot of other things, and we're going through a bit of a situation at the moment where there's a lot of these MCP servers and things cropping up all over the place. And the problem is well, how on earth do you actually connect into them securely? And especially if you're not necessarily a developer, how does all this work? Okay, so what we're going to do is take another little leap with Docker Desktop. Okay. So Docker Desktop, yep, it's usually used for developers to build apps and run containers, they call it, which are essentially mini mini little systems running on your local machine, but obviously in a more professional world, they'll be running in clustered servers and all this type of stuff. Anyway, we're not going to go into that either, but you can get Docker Desktop free for personal use. Okay, so you can go to whoops, where that one's gone. Let me get that back. There we go. I was trying to get back to Docker. It's a professional outfit, this, no editing. But anyway, Docker. So if you go to docker.com, you can download Docker Desktop for whatever flavor of operating system, Mac or Windows, etc. Okay, so the reason I mention that is because Docker is very good at running containers, in other words, isolated bits of code like a database system or a web service or whatever it is that's going to be run. But as of, I don't know when it came out, it's a few months ago, as the time of this recording anyway, is the MCP toolkit. Okay, so this is a way of having these MCP servers, and we'll get to the clients in a second, but you can look at the catalog, and essentially there's a lot of MCP servers. These are the bits that are actually connecting to, whether it's a database system or, whatever it might be, a browser where you can actually do things automatically with the browser, Slack and all that sort of stuff. So the idea is these are sort of trusted MCP servers that run in little mini Docker containers. So when you request something to happen, like connect to a tool, it will spin these up in the background. But the main thing is right now, this makes it very easy for generally a non-techie person to get started with this, to understand what MCP is all about. So what I've done, and there's lots of them and growing all the time, I've used the YouTube MCP so I can connect the AI to YouTube to do things like get transcripts and things like that. Okay, I've also used Notion. Okay, so there's an official Notion MCP server. Okay, so one little example that I'm going to show you is go get a transcript off a YouTube video and give me a bullet point list of that summary and put it into a Notion page. Okay, so what I've got at the moment is I've got two servers that I've selected. Okay, YouTube transcripts, and they're the number of tools that I've got. If I click on those, you'll see the tools that are available. So get transcript, get video info, get time transcript, things like that. Okay, so these are all the tools that are exposed by that MCP server. So Notion has got a few more, 19 of them, but you can do things like, create a database. There's all sorts of things, but we're doing things like where it's going to create a page, essentially. So we're going to create a page in our setup in Notion. So the other thing that we need to do, so once you get Docker Desktop running, and if you're struggling with any of these things, let me know in the comments, because I am going to go through a little bit of a course to actually set these things up, because there's a lot of good stuff here that you can actually get across with MCP without really knowing any of the coding stuff. If you want to go a bit further than that, then fine, that's even better. We'll be going through that as well in upcoming videos and a couple of courses that I've got on the boil at the moment. But the other thing that you can do from the MCP toolkit in Docker is go to clients. So this is where I had that diagram. The MCP servers are the bits that connect and do the things like connect to YouTube or connect to Notion. And then a client is where you need to call it from, that hooks into your AI. So I've got a couple of Claudes, or Claudie. I like to call it Claudie, but I know it's not right. Anyway, I'll shut up. So I've got Claude Code, which is, if you're a developer, you can have that running and connected, but also Claude Desktop. Okay, so I've got Claude Desktop connected. It's quite straightforward. Once you've got the Claude Desktop downloaded over here. You can download for whatever it is, log in. And by the way, you don't need a pro account to do any of these things. Docker Desktop for personal is free. Claude Desktop is free. And everything that I'm showing you so far is free. Okay. So the idea is, if I go back quickly to there, you can connect quite easily. There's not really a lot to worry about there. Okay. So the idea is, once you've done that, once you've gone and selected your servers, your MCP servers, and you've connected your client, like this one, if you then run Claude Desktop, okay, this is how it looks. If you're not sure about this, it's really fine. It's okay. It's just another chat interface like it is with ChatGPT. Okay, so what you can then do is you can put a prompt in and say, you know, what's the weather like today or whatever it is. But if you notice here, you've got search and tools, okay? And essentially, when you come into here, there are a couple of settings that you need to maybe go through under settings to enable this. But you can see that there's MCP Docker. If I click on that, we've got all of the things. So there's all of these tools. Most of these tools are the Notion ones, but you can see we've got get transcript and things like that. So these are all enabled. And the way it works is that magically those MCP servers expose, like, I suppose it's the definition. So it knows when you say, I want a YouTube transcript, because you've got that tool enabled, it knows to go and look at that and do a transcription of a YouTube video. Same thing with Notion. Okay, so I've got Notion set up. So what I'm going to do is basically grab a YouTube URL, okay, ask for a summary, a bullet point summary, and add that to my Notion page. Okay, so I've got Notion set up. If you don't know about Notion, that's worth checking out. And what I've got is a private page. Now, what you do have to do is when you create that MCP page, I've created like a top level page. Okay, so everything that I'm about to do is going to get created below that page. And that's important because what you have to do is share that page basically with the MCP server. So when you go to your profile in Notion, okay, you basically get the option to add integrations. Okay, so you can create new integrations with, you know, lots of different things. I've got one for MCP Docker. Okay, so if I have a quick look in there, you'll see it's got this integration secret. So you need to copy that. You need to show that and copy it. And also you need to make sure that you've got the right capabilities. So this is where it becomes, obviously, it's down to your preference. But I've got read, update, and insert content. And I want to be able to read and insert comments as well. Okay. So this is the standard sort of thing. So you have to be careful what level of access you give, but the point being is I've only allowed that page there to be accessed, so I can create pages below it, but it can't do anything else in Notion at the moment. So once I've got that integration set up, I can now go back to my Claude code, Claude Desktop. I do apologize, I keep saying that, don't I? And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab just a video, okay, just off YouTube. This one is about Docker model running, which you can run local models. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to grab that link, okay. So now I'm going to say to Claude, because I've got those tools, those MCP tools enabled, I'm going to say, I have this YouTube video, which is that. Yep. Please provide, I always say please, provide a bullet point list, bullet point summary list and create a Notion page called Docker local model runner. It doesn't really matter, it can be anything, under my MCP page, because that's that MCP page. And so the idea is I've limited the way that this AI can actually access. It can only access that MCP page and create or update things below that. Okay, so because it's now got these tools, let's give that a go. I'm using Sonnet 4.5 at the moment. But again, it's like a normal, chat bot at this stage. But here we go. There's the first thing. Claude wants to use get video info from MCP Docker. Okay, so the thing is, this can get a little bit annoying, but it's a very good reason, because it's prompting me to say, do you want to allow this to happen? Okay, now, eventually, if you're doing the same thing and you trust it and you've got used to it, you can do always allow. But I'm going to say allow once at the moment. So we're hopefully going to get the video transcript in a summary bullet point form at this stage, which will just give it a second or two. Okay, and it's got the transcript. Now it's letting me search for your MCP page in Notion. So again, once you get familiar with this and you know what it's doing, you can say always allow, but we'll say allow once. So it's looking for my top level MCP page in Notion. So it's looking for that page first because, yeah, great, it found my MCP page. Notice that I haven't had to give any IDs or anything like that. And it's going to create a new Notion page, video summary Docker model runner. So if I go back to Notion, behind the scenes there, it's going to create a page under here. I might have to refresh the page in a second, but it's giving me a bullet point summary of that video. And Claude wants to use, again, it's going to create a page, a post, which is basically a creation of a page in Notion. So again, I'm going to click allow once, but I can always click always allow. Okay, so it's now going to take that summary and create my Notion page. Okay, so there we go. It's creating the structure of what it needs to do. Again, you don't really have to know all of this detail. It's actually very good to know that if you want to at some stage. But the idea is, again, it's basically doing everything with your prompting. Again, I find once I've got things like this where I want to get like a YouTube transcript and put it into Notion, I just say always allow. Okay, so there we go. So it's going through the last of its bits, but I can already see behind the scenes here in Notion, under my MCP main page there, it's now created a new page. There it is, Docker Local Model Runner. There we go. That was the summary title that I wanted. It's got the link to the video for reference, and it's given me an overview. So getting transcripts from YouTube isn't really that novel anymore, is it? Everything does that. Copilot does it, but being able to show the way that these MCP tools are used just makes, because you can connect the same thing, what I've just done, you can connect to things like Slack or other applications, and there's lots of them out there, hundreds, thousands now, but the point being is, especially with something like Notion, then, you've got a way of being able to build up your knowledge base. By the way, I've got another connection to go to Obsidian, the note-taking app, which works in a very, very similar way, but you can create like reference links and things like that. But Claude Desktop becomes your... it's still going on and doing its thing down there. I'm just going to say always allow there. But the idea is it's a chatbot. So Claude Desktop, you can use other applications, but it's essentially a chatbot interface. But it's got the magical tools capability there, where, like I said, because we're using these Docker Desktop with the MCP toolkit, you don't have to go and configure all that. You don't have to go find it. Oh, how do I host that MCP server? Anything like that. Okay. So one other little aside, which I'm going to cover a bit more in detail in the next one, but yeah, it's definitely finished there. It's still going about its business there, but we can see in Notion it's definitely created that summary. I could have said, make it even a shorter summary, but there we go. So the only other thing that I wanted to touch on, that you may already know about NA10. Okay. It's a workflow automation platform, but in the last year or so, it's really sort of pivoted to an agent builder, and it is very, very clever. Okay. Interestingly, I'm using NA10 in Docker. Okay, so if I look at my containers, and don't worry about all of this, if you want to go deeper on this, let me know in the comments, of course. But I've got NA10 running, and I'm also using Cloudflare. So without throwing too much at you, I'm running NA10 locally on my machine in a Docker container. So it's on my platform. I don't have to expose it to the internet. But if I do want to expose it to the internet, Cloudflare is a very popular, huge service that's got lots of different services, actually. But one of them is tunnels, where you can have a secure tunnel, they call it. In other words, from the internet, you can tunnel down securely and safely into your machine. Now, in my case, the tunnel doesn't come down just to the whole of my PC. It only comes down to that Docker container. Okay, so it can't go any further. It can only access NA10 running in this Docker container. Okay, so and the idea is that I've got a domain name called bottybotbot. Don't blame me. Don't judge me. And I've got NA10. So this gives me a public URL that really maps down to my local host. So in other words, it's running locally in my machine. But like I say, it's running in a Docker container. I can stop and start that container when I like, and then this will not get any further. But also, I've got security around that and logins and stuff like that. And Cloudflare is quite a trusted service for all of this type of stuff, for large systems as well as small systems, to make sure they're protected from getting hacked as much as you can these days. But anyway, the idea is NA10 is this workflow engine, but like I say, you can build agents and all sorts of things. But if I show you very quickly, this is just a taster, and I'll cover this more in detail later. You can create what we saw there with the MCP server in Docker MCP Toolkit. You can also create your own in a low-code way. There is a little bit more codey bit to go in here, possibly. You don't have to, but you can add all of these other tools. You can add lots of other MCP tools. Okay, and there's there's loads. There's loads. You can do the same sort of thing. You can connect to Asana. You can connect to, again, Notion, all these sorts of things. But it's just a more graphical way. But I found what I showed you earlier with Claude Desktop connecting to the MCP toolkit in Docker, there really wasn't anything much to set up apart from a couple of clicks to say connect this to that. But the idea is I've got one here, which is just a simple calculator. So this is an MCP server, like we saw, like the YouTube transcript or the Notion MCP server. And then the idea is, I'll save it. The idea is you can then create like an AI chat agent. Now, you can create a web-based version of the chat. It's only got the chat built in to this platform at the moment, but it's very simple to actually create your own web-based form to actually have this with authentication if you want it. But you can have a chat. It goes into an AI agent, okay, which I'm using an OpenAI chat model. But if I just click on that, you can actually see that you can connect to all sorts of different sort of AI models. Okay, so the idea is I decided to use OpenAI, but you can connect to local models. So if we have a look, if we've got, we've got OpenAI there. You can select from all the different types of models that OpenAI have. But like I said, you can connect to other like Gemini and all sorts of things like that. But the point being is that basically connects up a bit like Claude Desktop. It provides the LLM for your chat process, but you can then connect memory, which I'm not going to cover today, but that's how it can remember what you've asked in the past. But you can also have tools, and you can have multiple tools. A tool can be many things. It can connect to other web services, but you can also connect to an MCP client. And in this one is actually connecting to, there's an endpoint there, but it's essentially connecting back to the MCP server there. So if I go to MCP server and click on that, or double click on that, there's a production URL, and that's that URL that was used. Okay, so that's how it knows to call that. But that's another way of actually using MCP in more of a workflow process. But again, you know, the simple thing was using something like Claude Desktop. You don't have to just use that, but that acts as the client. And as you saw, you can actually do some quite interesting things by connecting these MCP tools. And obviously using something like the Docker MCP toolkit means you don't really have to go and do much else other than go and have a look through the catalog, connect it up as we've seen, and away you go. It works with things like Claude Desktop or other AI clients of that nature. So anyway, hope you found that interesting. It's a very high level view. Let me know in the comments if you want to dig deeper about how to get this all set up yourselves, because, you know, as always, there are a few things you have to do, but it really isn't as difficult as you might think to get started with this. So anyway, wherever you are in the world, have a good day, good week, and I will catch you on the next one.